Star Trek has never just been about phasers and warp drives. It's about who we are and who we could be. That's where the idea of Trektivism comes from, promoting Star Trek's core values that inspire real-world activism and creating a bridge for volunteers to connect and collaborate. Today, we're honoured to welcome longtime Trek fan and host of the popular Trek fan show, The Transporter Room, and dig into how Gene Roddenberry's vision still challenges us and why fandom can be more than just entertainment and instead a force for change. So welcome to a new episode of the Open Source ReThink. Today, for the first time, we've got a guest on the show. I'm Thren, your host, and today we're joined by Head of Engineering for the Transporter Room, Chris DeBear. Hi Chris, nice to have you with us today.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me on today.
No, it's good to have you. Thanks for joining us. I've known you for some time now in relation to the Transporter Room, as the captain of the ship there as such. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris, and how you came to love Star Trek and everything that Star Trek is?
Okay. Well, so I think I actually started, as a lot of us did, more with Star Wars originally, because that was what was out when I was, kind of older, to start going to movies and whatnot. Because I don't, as I've said on my own channel, I cannot remember. I think either Star Trek 4 or 6 might have been the first ones I went to the theater. I think it was 4. But anyway, I've always had, been around sci-fi in general for growing up, and technology as well. I've got multiple relatives that are developers and programmers, and we've always been into sci-fi. The one thing what I can say the big difference between Star Trek and Star Wars is Star Trek is definitely more aligned with humanity, like with what we're doing here on Earth today, or just in general with Earth. It predicts, or it's trying to predict a positive future for humanity, to where you've got less crime, no hunger, just a much more positive aspect of where as a civilization we could become. And all the cool, but and that's as I've gotten older, that's the piece you pick up even more. But all the cool technology, the communicators, transporters, the ships, being able to go faster than light and meet other people potentially is just so cool. I mean, oh my God, I would, we're actually getting ready to do some stuff on my channel eventually to start talking about technologies. But anyway, a transporter is it would be awesome to have. A couple of weeks, I've been in Vegas recently for a convention. I'd be like, oh, I would have been so nice. I could have just come home every day and slept in my own bed and not have to pay for a hotel. But yeah, no, it's just, and then just the characters of the series, I've always enjoyed them. I mean, you can't go wrong with Captain Kirk, obviously. He's the original OG captain out there. But then you've just...
Can I interject for a moment? I'm going to ask you an awkward question, and feel free not to answer if you don't want to. But as you mentioned, the fact that there has been a wide arrangement of different captains or Captain Kirk characters, which do you think has been your favourite overall? I know Shatner was the OG, but who would you say was your ultimate favourite?
I still think I'm going to obviously lean towards Shatner first, because he's obviously the original Kirk. And, well, there's really only been one other, which was Chris Pine. Until recently with Strange New Worlds, now we're getting Paul Wesley is playing a younger Kirk. So
it doesn't have to be a Kirk. It could have been a Kirk iteration. Like say, I was really only opening that up just to give you the option of mentioning Chris Pine, because I think I'd mentioned this to you before. I really like the new films, but that probably puts me out of favor slightly with the Star Trek fandom community.
It really depends on the JJ, because we call those the JJ movies, and Star Trek 2009.
Right.
But like if I'm actually going to have to pick a captain,
Yeah, any captain.
honestly, I actually still prefer, Captain Jonathan Archer from the series, Enterprise. And and that's also one of the reasons why Enterprise is probably my favorite of the series.
Right.
And then I would say it would be Archer, Picard, Cisco, and then, Janeway's definitely up there as well. It's almost kind of like, depending upon the situation, might actually dictate which captain would be the top, obviously. But and I can explain, why I liked Archer so much is because, and what I liked about Enterprise was we're getting to see humanity take its first steps into, actual joining, interstellar space and exploring.
Yep.
And at this time, humanity, Earth, does not have the Prime Directive or any of those rules. And so they're learning, and he stumbles. I'm not gonna lie, he stumbles several times. But yes, so Archer is definitely one of my favorite captains. He's not everybody's favorite, and I know that. But
yeah. I would certainly say me as somebody who's like, I'm not like, I very much love Star Trek and everything that it stood for, but I couldn't ever, I probably haven't followed it closely enough to ever claim to call myself an out-and-out Trekkie as such. But I have loved it all the way through. Now, just with you mentioning that captain's name, it's certainly one that I'm the least familiar with in relation to the Star Trek captain. So yeah, I think even as a non-full-out Trekkie, that seems like a curious choice.
Yeah. Well, and then again, everybody has their own. I mean, I've got everybody, there are people that love, Cisco, golly, Cisco from Deep Space Nine he is a phenomenal commanding officer. He starts as a commander, then eventually becomes a captain as the series progresses. But, he's great.
Do you want to know my favorite two? My favorite two, and again, it's probably not for the fact that they were the best captains in the Star Trek universe. It was more the fact of what they brought to the roles. So it's Jean-Luc Picard, absolutely, and purely because I love Patrick Stewart as an actor. He's a brilliant actor. He brings so much personality and presence to every role he's in, more or less. And Captain Janeway, purely because I'm a fan of strong female leadership. I'm one of these people that believes if we had more female leaders on this planet, we would have fewer problems.
Probably so.
So yeah, that's why I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Captain Janeway in that.
Oh, absolutely. Regard. To give you a story here, and not even just a story, but lots of stories. Like just recently, I was at STLV, which is the big annual, the largest Star Trek convention out there, and they had the entire Voyager cast was on a panel, and so on and so on, and then most of the people that came up and asked questions, especially they were like for like how much Kate Mulgrew's character of Captain Janeway influenced women into going into science in general. It is phenomenal. And like there was I know we're probably getting way off topic, but still, anyway, there was I think she was a 10 or 12-year-old girl came to ask a question, and she said, I've always liked the Captain Janeway because she's led me to become an electrical engineer. She wants to be an EE. And Kate was like, "You get up here, young lady, and just talk to her." And this kid was smart. I'm not 100% sure. She may not ever be in college, to be honest with you. But it's that type of influence that Kate Mulgrew and that character has had on society in general. Now, I've been to conferences and stuff, and I've talked to people and actual actors that people that were on the series, and I learned from Garrett Wong, who played Harry Kim. He was telling me that after the series premiered, the pilot, Paramount got so much. They got calls and letters and all that ranging from obviously this is the best thing. Why have y'all not done it until now? To in the middle of the road of like, why'd you pick a woman? All the way to death threats of bombings at the studio back when the series premiered. And that's just when he told me that story, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And he says, "No, that was true." So it's a tough one. That sucks. But no, and I agree. I like Picard as well. Because he, such a it's first off, Patrick Stewart's a great actor, and I think he's in his portrayal of Picard is such a diplomatic. He's so good at diplomacy. I mean, there's been, I think I've seen shirts, I know I've seen, Kirk Spock for president. I think I might have even seen Picard Riker, maybe not Picard Riker, but, Picard and somebody, for president and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's, again, each of those captains has.
Picard and Riker together have another worldwide record that they hold. I'm pretty sure. I don't have the statistics on it to say it's factual, but I'm going to guess that Jean-Luc Picard and Riker hold the record probably for spawning the most Star Trek memes.
Ha! Probably.
Because honestly, the number of Star Trek related memes that you see that gravitate around Jean-Luc Picard and Riker, there's just so many.
Oh, absolutely. They're all over the place.
But I do find them quite amusing. Like I say, I'm a huge fan of memes, and I have to say that the Picard ones do always sit quite well with me.
And then the Cisco ones are pretty good too. But there's not as many of them that I've seen.
Yeah, and just going back to what you mentioned before because I want to move on to the technology aspects at some point, because you mentioned that before around, about what Star Trek kind of brings to the table in relation to technology and its technology predictions for the future. And, it has, if you look back, especially at the original miniseries and then through the much earlier iterations of Star Trek and some of the new technologies that they presented, which was very much future tech at the time, which when you look at it now, it's pretty much everyday stuff, like tablets, for instance. I remember as a child watching them walk around with what was probably a clipboard that was painted, to make it look like a tablet or some prop. But again, it was just like this small device at a time where handheld computers were an absolute no-no. The computers that were around at that time still filled a room. So to see people walking around with this small, lightweight device you could hold in your hands that done everything a big computer did, that's far off fantasy science stuff. But today, we have that supercomputer packed into a handheld device, much like Star Trek predicted.
Oh my God, yes.
And again, if you look at the artificial, some of the very early episodes that where Kirk had interactions with super intelligent AI beings or super intelligent robots. And again, it's like, they predicted this. This at some point we would get to a point to talking about it, and it's almost a realistic thing today that we sit and speak to AI agents and AI large language models all the time. And again, those things are starting to embody a physical presence as well, with embodied AI and more robotics having AI on board. We're kind of there. Data will be a thing one day.
Well, absolutely. I know. I mean, I don't think it'll be in our lifetimes probably, but we will get somewhere. You stop and think about, oh gosh, I don't remember where it was on. I was watching the podcast, probably one of the Delta Flyers or one of them. Anyway, they were talking about, they were making a kind of a comment about the pads and the tablets that they used, even in TNG and Voyager and all that stuff, how thick they were versus where we are today. When you think about, like your iPhones and just your cell phones in general, just pick a cell phone that's a smartphone and, that's what, you had your communicators and, I remember that when the Motorola StarTAC came out, it was the first flip phone. And they purposely, I think Motorola purposely did what they could to make it look like, or act like the the communicator from TOS, the original series. And I think so.
Is that the one that was featured in the Matrix movies? It got a lot of hype.
No,
it was in the first. No, there was a Motorola phone that was hyped in the Matrix film. I remember at the time that it was used in the ad and the marketing campaigns. You know, they had the Matrix plastered all over it. This Motorola, because you could press a button on the side of the phone and the bottom would like click out.
I thought those were Nokias. Or maybe
was it a Nokia? Yeah, I'm not sure.
I know there's one of them was a Nokia because I think I actually had it at some point in time. Oh gosh, but yeah, no, I mean, but again, you've got, you know, the communicators, which is our cell phones, and even, you know, you don't have tricorders even still to this day, but we're getting closer at times. But still, if you take out the ability to like, you know, sense the environment and all that type of stuff, but if you just look at it as a data with something that has the ability to get into a database per se, well, okay, again, now you have your phone. Tricorders could, you know, yes, they can tell the environment and all that, but we may not have that. They're working on it, but still, you've got within your phone, if you want to think about tricorder, you can, it's got maps, can tell you how to get places. It can tell you, you know, altitudes, and, you know, even that you've got your, you know, you've got your gyros in your phone. So if you think about it, I mean, you can pull up just about anything you want as long as you have, well, this is going to lead to something else, but I mean, you just think about it. So you've got your cell phones, which again, basically like a tricorder, but you can put all the data you want anywhere that, as long as you have access to a terrestrial based cellular network. But now Starlink and this iPhones, I don't know about Androids, but I know iPhones are now even starting to integrate Starlink access. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's, I mean, if you really stop to think about it, it's kind of just mind-boggling to think that we are getting, every day, we are getting closer and closer to having a truly global data network that our phones can access, and you will be able to pull up any information you ever want. Just, you know, and then you get into the medical side of stuff. That's one area where I still feel like we are, you know, still pretty far behind, relatively far behind compared to Star Trek. But again, we are advancing just so rapidly in our medical technology, and you know, that's where space is going to help.
You mentioned the medical side of there, and it reminded me of, again, when we were talking about devices, what was the little thing that the doctor would hover over the patient? I would like literally do like a body scan, and check all their vital signs within moments, and then they had literally like all this information about the patient available. Yeah, I mean,
it's just a medical tricorder. That's all it is. This is it's a medical tricorder instead of just a regular one. It's got the little thing that, you know, Captain.
Right,
I mean,
so it's pretty much the same thing, but just like multi-purpose. It's just a data recorder that's got every sensor you could imagine built in.
Yes, and it had the ability to look at all your vitals and all that stuff. My God, I can't even fathom like how much. I mean, just tricorder technology for be able to do on the medical would be just a game changer in diagnostic.
When I think about Star Trek technologies in particular, the two ones that I suppose jump out at me in the most apparent way are warp technology and the your replicator.
Yes.
Your replicator device.
Well, as I've had people that have interviewed on my channel, when I ask them, my last question I always ask is, you know, what piece of Star Trek technology do you wish existed today? And when I first started asking that, I personally expected to be warp drive or transporters, for the fact that we can, you know, if we had warp, we could potentially we'd be able to explore, you know, the galaxy and the universe a lot better, our area. And then transporters, because you can get from point A to point B in like 5 seconds. But a lot of people say replicators. Now, transporters and replicators use some of the same, basically same premise of technology. But when I asked that question the first time someone said replicators, it did kind of catch me off guard at first. I was like, okay, food, whatever. And then they explained it. I was like, oh my God, yes. If you have replicators, then you could potentially end world hunger because you'd be able to replicate, I mean, not just world hunger, medicines. You could replicate medicines,
Yep.
all this. I mean, the implications that would come from having a replicator to be able to do that and make medicines, food. I mean, oh my God, it's amazing. But unfortunately, as you know, with anything that can do good, it can also do bad. And so you would have to highly limit what could be replicated. You'd have to put safeguards in, Now, again, doesn't mean that you could not eventually, figure out how to overcome those safeguards because, let's be honest, you could probably put in 3D printers.
Somebody jailbreaks the replicator.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just thinking even in today's, like you said, 3D printers. I mean, sure, you could probably, the manufacturers, they could potentially put in code that would prevent a commercial and or residential 3D printer from being able to print like gun parts or something like that.
Well, look at that. For years now, you've had security technologies for like email systems, for example, that can scan images and tell that image might be inappropriate, so we're not going to allow it through the safety gates.
Correct.
And again, similar thing, with enough AI behind that technology, where it could recognize what the item is that's trying to be replicated or printed in today's terms, and be able to go, no, that's on the ban list. You're not making that thing, and it refuses to comply with your request.
Oh yeah.
You're right. Those kind of guardrails would definitely be possible given the utilization of other technologies that we could bring to bear.
Yeah.
No pun intended there.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things we did want to discuss today was Trektivism, and the reason for that was because actually it was a term that I learned watching one of the earlier episodes of your show in the transporter room.
Yes.
I think one of your early guests was on to talk around Trektivism, and I have to admit it was a term that was new to me. I'd never really heard about it, and I was quite interested in that. So yeah, I wanted to kind of ask you a couple of things around.
Okay.
What does Trektivism kind of mean to you? How does the Gene Roddenberry vision of the way the world should work kind of fit with today's activism, and how do you think it takes us into kind of building a better future?
Well, the Trektivism was a term I actually only learned a couple of years, about maybe a year or two ago before I even got started. And I guess you could say the broad definition is just that it's to the Trek community, which is a large community, we should be supporting organizations that are here to betterment life for people and or do research. So I think the interview you're talking about was I was talking with played Dr. Phlox on Star Trek Enterprise, John Billingsley, and he was a member of the Hollywood Food Coalition, him and his wife. And so every year they do a big fundraiser for that, or they were, and I think they're going to do it again. I think they've done Trek Talks 4, maybe 5 is coming up next. But anyway, what it's just a term that it tries to bring together all the Star Trek community to help raise money, or bring attention to an issue. It doesn't even have to always be raising money, but just to bring attention to an issue of some form or fashion that it needs to be maybe remedied. But like what John was, like I said, for John, he was part of the Hollywood Food Coalition, and they raise money to, basically it's to feed people. And it's not just in California, but, they've got, you can do it. They can get you in contact with other people, but they raise funds to help feed, just give people food, a daily meal. not just homeless, but homeless, the less unfortunate, someone maybe you just can't afford some food or something. You're, having a bad patch or something you're in right now. And that's just one. And then the next big one that is very well, that the Trek actors and the community are very, active in, is the pancreatic cancer network called PanCan, and that's one that he talked about as well, because pancreatic cancer is since PanCan started, what they were talking about on that in his interview, and then the big, their big, fundraiser that PanCan does is that, pancreatic cancer is I think the survival rate's now like 13%, 14%. But anyway, but that's just two examples that I've personally talked with these, the people that are involved. But it's, food banks, homeless, marginalized, individuals and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's to use the Trek community to bring awareness to situations out there that need help.
To me, although I heard the term Trektivism for the first time, when I thought about it, I wasn't really that surprised, because I suppose given Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future and the kind of the ethics and the kind of ethos around that in general, and and given the fact that such a huge fandom has come up around Star Trek, the fact that such a grouping or such a kind of movement would pop up within that fandom isn't surprising. Because again, a fandom can be a really powerful thing, and like you mentioned, when it comes to raising money or pushing with kind of collective buying power or whatever that may be, a fandom can bring a lot of weight behind a particular cause. So it's a really good thing, and I was really kind of pleased to hear that such a thing does exist within the fandom community for Star Trek.
And even back, was it in 23 when they had the writer strike and the strikes in LA? The Star Trek, community, more the actors and the talent, but everybody still supported them in trying to. I'm not gonna lie, I learned quite a bit listening to some of the actors, like Michelle Hurd, some others talk about the things that the studios were trying to do until they can get this, were able to negotiate a new contract. It was amazing, but not in an amazing good way. Like, I remember them talking about on one interview, one example is they would pay you, and the bulk was extras. They would be like, for extra cast, they would pay you one time to get to get your image, and then they would be able to, through AI, just replicate you numerous times, just unlimited.
Yeah.
So they don't have to pay you, because AI generated. Just like what we're doing right here. AI generated characters are a lot cheaper than a human. So, but again,
and it's worrying when you hear that so many film studios are signing big deals with AI companies for generative video and the like. And again, because it does mean that, again, if you signed a contract with that company to star in a particular movie where effectively your image and your likeness and your voice are becoming part of that studio's back catalogue, and then they go and sign a deal with an AI company for generative content, what content are they using to train that? And again, what's in the fine print of your contract as an actor when you signed with that studio? And it does, you kind of have to feel for the acting community, as in, like, they might have been they might have been duped slightly here, and something that they maybe didn't foresee. I've talked about this a lot when it comes to AI in general, and I know I'll not diverge too much off on this track, but the whole thing about kind of building an AI future is that we need to do it ethically. And again, a lot of people are just finding out as they go how the change in AI in our society is going to affect them. And for the longest period of time, I think most people assumed that when AI and robotics came to the point that it was starting to impact on people's jobs, that it would start with the kind of bottom run of jobs first. It would be all your manual labor jobs and low skill jobs were the most at risk. And I don't think anybody foreseen that actually kind of middle level professional jobs and creative jobs will actually be the most at risk initially, because that's kind of how it's panning out.
Well, and the bad thing is we need to figure out how to use AI to not replace those people, but to supplement those people somehow.
Augment,
that's
and
better.
improve.
Augment's the correct word.
Use it as a tool. Yeah, absolutely.
Because
I mean, again, this is you're right.
Because okay, this is a perfect example of how technology, and I mean, again, both of us are, we like technology. I mean, hello, I like Trek, but everything, but still, I can tell you, and it kind of surprised me. I remember, growing up, you went to the bank, you went to the teller, you gave them all of your money, checks, blah, blah, all that stuff. You had an interaction with the human. Now, I have actually gone to banks that they still have the drive up, but it is all like ATM type machines. And they may have one person now that runs all those machines instead of having 2 or 3 who used to do that. Because, so and I feel kind of bad because I remember the day when I could, just take through my mobile phone, take a check, which if people still get checks, but still take a check and just take a picture of the front and back with my phone and mobile deposit it. I now did not have to go talk to a human, go to that bank, which means they don't have to maintain those buildings as much or have as much, as many humans. So again, technology it's great, and AI and everything like that. But until we have a society to replace, okay, what's that person going to do who used to be a teller now?
Yep.
Because they've been replaced by a computer.
Yep. And this is, again, without drifting too far into another subject, because actually we're intending to. Well, actually, what we want to do is a follow-up discussion about some of what this discussion is touching on here, which is about the next step. Because if you think about the infrastructure setup that you just mentioned there, the one aspect that is holding that whole thing back, and also the machines themselves, why are they required to deal with the physical cash itself? Now, again, if you just move to a digital currency, there would be no need for those places at all, because everything would be done online or remotely, and you don't actually need the machines to process the cash. But then that moves me on to the next point, because one of the discussions we want to pick up in the future, and something very relevant to Star Trek and how Star Trek envisages the future, is there is no money at all. We've removed money from society. But like I say, I want to hold that discussion for another day, because I think, that discussion in itself, that's a whole topic all on its own about how we move from society today. And a lot of this falls squarely with Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future, wherein the whole of humanity is working for the betterment of humanity, not necessarily tied up in the pursuit of personal gain and money. And given the technology advances that we just mentioned about robotics and AI in a world that potentially is forming round about us, where, just to make a brief point, I've said for quite a while that the last industrial revolution that humanity had very much created more and more capacity, bigger factories, more production, more people working. This industrial revolution that we're having today, this technological revolution of AI and robotics, means the exact opposite.
Yes.
So how do we shape a future that can be ready for that change in a requirement for an actual workforce? How do you move to an economy that doesn't rely on everybody earning a wage and paying into the system in order to survive? Because that's the future we're creating, where there literally won't be enough jobs for everybody to go and have. So what do we do in that future? So but definitely we'll pick that up in more detail on a future discussion, because it's definitely a discussion worth having. But just to pull it back to the kind of Trektivism part of this kind of for a moment, because around it, like I say, it does really intrigue me around the kind of Trektivism. But I mean, I suppose without knowing a lot about it, do you think, if you had to put it into one camp or the other, would you say Trektivism's about, is there an overall mission statement for the long term about trying to move us more to a Starfleet-like society, or is it more about learning smaller individual lessons on a kind of day-to-day basis about how you approach the world of today Or is it more about trying to move to a future that's more reminiscent of a Starfleet-like society?
I think this is just my personal opinion. I think it's a little bit of, it's kind of it's going to be a line, a growth over time as to where we're going to, we've got to work on ourselves initially and make these small steps and these small changes to the where that we are making that path to the we're making our way to the society where people are or should not be oppressed for for their gender, their race, anything like that. And so I think that's where the Trektivism will allow us. It's going to help us get. It will help us get to that era of when poverty. So poverty, racism,
war,
all that stuff it will never be gone. I don't care what Gene's utopian society would be great. I don't think that will happen 100% like that. But as long as we can get some of it, a good chunk of it, to where, people don't have to worry about, whatever, anything like that, like I said, war, poverty, suffering, starvation, all that. If we could just get rid of those or just help to give it better access to all those things, just honestly, if we can just use the Trektivisms to get to where we can just provide basic needs for people, I think that's kind of his vision.
Removing some of the more negative elements that affect society as a whole, and how we treat each other and how we move through the world. Because again, a couple of the points you mentioned there about inclusion and diversity is one thing that I think Star Trek for a long time has actually done a good job of promoting. I mean, even right back to the original miniseries with Uhura on the bridge in the 60s,
Well, and also, I mean, if we want to get into the kiss between Kirk and Uhura, that was unheard of back in the 60s. That was a big one. But also, just the gender gap. Unfortunately, they did not get to do what they really wanted to do because there's two pilots to the original series. There's the one that had Captain Pike, and then you have the second one, so the first pilot never aired, but they actually had a woman, it was Major Barrett, was the first officer. She was the first officer on Enterprise, but they weren't ready to the network was not ready for that, and they were afraid, so they got rid of that, and they went with like Spock and all that. And but still, even with that setback, they still had women on the bridge. They had you had Sulu, and you had Chekhov, which so now you're showing again they were trying to say this is a future to where doesn't matter if you're a woman or somebody from, of course, back in then it was the, Soviet Union and the U.S., Cold War stuff. And so, but we had Chekhov. And so it's like, that's what Gene's vision is trying to get us to where it doesn't matter if you're male, female, what your skin color is, where you're from, we can all live in harmony.
Yep.
Now, I hope we get to see that. I hate to say this, I just don't know if I will see it in my lifetime.
I think you've just verged on answering what my next question was going to be, and that was just given everything that you've said. Do you think that we're moving closer or further away from that Star Trek vision that Roddenberry had?
Hate to say it.
And I think you've answered that question.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just going to say, I hate to say it, I think it's a day by day process because Sometimes I feel like we are, and then you can turn on,
Backslide a little.
yeah, you can turn on the news or look at, either news on your TV, or you can look at stuff on your phone, and you're like, well, okay, well, we just set ourselves back, 20 years or whatever. Yeah, I just,
It's a moment in time, and because it's funny because you mentioned Cisco earlier, didn't you? Mm-hmm. And because just that when I was on about the examples that Star Trek's given us throughout time, where they kind of point towards what's going on in society,
Yeah.
as a bit of a dig about, actually we could do this better. You remember Deep Space Nine's past tense episode?
oh,
Cisco
God.
and Bashir end up in the 21st century San Francisco,
yes.
and they're
The
trapped
Bell
in a
riots.
government-run sanctuary district
Yes.
for the homeless. Yeah,
The Bell riots.
and it's like, so like I say, you can't see a clearer example of poverty, inequality, mass incarceration, and all these things that we just do that are bad to each other. And again, it's like it's another instance that felt like this is Star Trek having a little bit of a dig about the way we're dealing with things, and the way that we should be doing things. We should be doing things a lot better.
Yeah, and it is, and like you said, it's a just in time thing. It's some days I feel like we're moving forward, but then you have a setback, and then you've got to reset and restart. I do think at some point in time we will get there. I just don't know when. And I mean, I'd love to see it before, in our lifetimes, but I'm not going to go into another aspect of what I think will take it to make it happen. I'm not going to go there because I want to keep this as a positive discussion. It was a question I used to ask on my channel, and I stopped just because it could get dark, and I was like, no, I don't want to go there. I like ending on a positive. I like ending on a positive tone when I'm doing an interview.
There's a lot of positives that I think come from, because I think Star Trek, you can't even just call it a TV show or a series of movies.
No.
Star Trek's become so much more
It's a culture.
than just exactly, and again, and that is huge in itself. But for somebody outside of that, they don't see that until, again, like I asked you at the beginning of the interview, what is it that kind of got you about Star Trek and kept you there and kind of really brought you on board, and for an outsider looking in. So if you could pick or point to one Star Trek moment that shaped how you see the world, what would it be?
That's a hard one, but I feel like, honestly, the scene in First Contact when we actually meet the Vulcans, when they come down to Earth and introduce themselves, and we actually had a positive interaction with them, and not a negative. They didn't act scared. Zephyr Cochrane was happy and thrilled to meet, there were other people out there, other civilizations out there. So I think, and I hope,
and Zephyr Cochrane was a hard man to please as well.
Yes, and I hope that, and I'm going to say this, gives two sides of this story. I hope if there are actual aliens out there, and if they ever do decide to come and say hi to us, that we have the positive interaction with them and not the mirror universe interaction where instead of shaking the hands of the Vulcans, he shot them. So, but I mean, I think that's a good representation of how we should do it. If we get to actually ever meet another race, that we were able, not another race, another alien species out there, to make it a positive interaction instead of being negative. Now, I'm not going to say, would I be a little freaked out if I saw an alien ship come out? Maybe, probably so. But we don't need to be attacking them. So yeah, I think that's a good one that represents, how we should be kind to everybody.
Yeah, because I've heard this mentioned a few times about, the fact that if there was a super intelligent alien civilization out there somewhere that's achieved, intergalactic travel, and they're moseying around the galaxy thinking, who are we going to visit, who are we going to check in on? And if they had the ability to surveil Earth and look at how we go about things on Earth and what we do, you'd think, a lot of people have said, it's like, well, why would they come here and want to speak to us at all? They'd go like,
Not now.
they'd put the equivalent of like bollards, like road cones round Earth and go like, steer clear. There's a bit of an issue there.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have to think that they would also do the research, and they would
Yeah.
see that, things like Trektivism, things like Star Trek fandom that kind of pushes, and again, so many other kind of movements for good that
Yeah.
exist in the world. They would see that too and understand that Earth and humanity aren't just the bad parts. There's a lot of good there as well.
Yeah.
Again, you know me, I always like taking things to movies. The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves, or the story in general. Again, they're here to save Earth
Yeah.
from the humans. And we have to convince them that we're not all bad. There are
Yeah.
some good people too. But again, it's if you just look on the surface, you look through media, etc., and just
Yeah.
look at the world that we live in. Yeah, there is so much that is negative, but there's a whole lot that is really, really good as well. So it's a balance, isn't it? It's just we have to just keep trying to push that balance in the right direction. And just the last thing, I suppose, just to kind of tie up on the newbie front, as in, for somebody that doesn't understand or doesn't know Star Trek as in depth, that somebody that's been watching it for a lot of years, where would you tell, if they've never seen Star Trek in their life,
So
where would you tell them to start? At what point would you tell them to start, like, watching the back catalogue to understand Star Trek in its best way? Where would you tell them to begin? Would it be all the way back at the original miniseries and work their way through time, or would you
Nope.
point out a particular series to them?
I would have never thought this would be my answer until I started working with some other people in the fandom. And unfortunately, the series, you can't even get season 1 anymore. But Star Trek Prodigy, an animated version of Star Trek.
Right.
And the reason why is because it is a group of kids or youngsters who are trying to learn about, they're being taught by a hologram Janeway.
Right.
And she's explaining the Federation and all this stuff, so you don't have, and so it's actually talking about Starfleet and the Federation. So, because if you go into, because we thought about other series, I mean, you could start with the Enterprise because it's literally nothing. It is the beginning of Starfleet. But if you could start with that, but you also really you watch Prodigy, because again, it's introducing you to the Federation and Starfleet and all of that. And so, and you don't have to have any background in it because it actually introduces you to the backgrounds.
So it kind of works best as the kind of standalone package, basically.
Yes. It surprises me that I'm saying it's a cartoon, but it really is. I never thought I would say that because. And
I'm not surprised. Do you know why I'm not surprised about that, Chris? Because honestly, one of my favourite films, again, not to take it too far away from Star Trek, but it's The Matrix.
Yeah.
And I've always said to people, as a trilogy of movies, and I'm going to continue to say a trilogy, because in my head there wasn't a fourth movie, or there shouldn't have been. But the original trilogy of good films that there was, you can't really watch those and love them and then not have seen The Animatrix, which is a collection of animated shorts which basically create a bit of a backstory, side story, and some future stories, which you really need to know about and see to really. I mean, if the Matrix trilogy is 3 slices of bread, then the Animatrix is the jam that holds them together.
Yeah, no, and I have to agree. I mean, and that's why I was just talking with someone who's working with me on the channel recently, and that's what she said is like, Prodigy is a good start for people to get into the series because you don't have to know about Kirk, Picard, any of those people. You get a little, you learn about Starfleet, the Federation, all that stuff through hologram Janeway, and it's just and it progresses, and then they do bring in stories from other series, and I'm not going to give anything away, but like Prodigy season 2, I was like, oh my God, they're talking about that happened in another series, and they tied it in, which was so freaking cool. So yeah, no. And then Lower Decks is hilarious. I mean, it's animated Star Trek, but it does rely on a lot of canon from other series, like, TNG, Enterprise, DS9, all of them. So it's, I mean, not that you couldn't start there, but you do need to have some understanding of what they're talking about, because there's a lot of references. But Prodigy, you can start and then go from there. Yeah. Only problem is, it's only had 2 seasons, and they've already taken season 1 off of Netflix, and it's nowhere to be found I'm aware of right now. And season 2 is not, and they're not making another they're not redoing it. So
it'll be in an archive somewhere, and hopefully it's retrievable.
Yeah.
And maybe just going back to what you said before about trying to change mindsets, moving into the future, and like shift the world towards being the best place we can make it. Maybe that's where you start. Make it part of the required curriculum in schools that primary school kids have to see.
Yeah,
have to be shown this series of Star Trek animations.
Hey, do something. Hey, it's better than, I mean,
yeah.
Believe me, there's other things they don't need to be watching. But yeah, that's what I would say. That's my answer. Never thought. If you'd asked me that a few months ago, I would have never thought that'd be my answer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you have to think from the production point of view. Perhaps that's why they made it in such a way to be a good, kind of binding element around all the other aspects of Star Trek. Because again, if you haven't followed the series all the way through, you haven't kept up with it, if there is crucial parts, like you say, sometimes it builds a bit of a dependency on knowing the backstory to fully appreciate the current story. Mm-hmm. And again, sometimes that can be seen as a bit of an obstacle in the uptake of a series, because people will tune out if they somehow feel they're missing out on information from a backstory that they're not inclined to currently go and watch. Then they might just tune out of the current thing. Yep. I'm more inclined to, when I see something like that, if it interests me, and if it's part 3 of something, I'm like, right, I'm going to go and watch the first 2 now, so I can get to watching part 3. But some people, they just put it down and maybe don't pick it up again. So it might have been by design that it was packaged in such an all-encapsulating way.
Mm-hmm. Well, they did it to bring younger viewers, trying to get younger viewers into the series. Yeah, that's it. But that would be the one. Never thought I'd say cartoon.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I haven't actually seen it at all. Yeah, it's one that I haven't seen, but now that you've mentioned that, I will definitely need to take a look out for it.
You have to see, and I don't know. I know it's, like I said, I know it's been removed from Netflix.
Right.
But I don't know if that's Netflix globally or just US. I have no idea on that part. That's all over the place. But anyway,
that's the benefits of VPN technology. Yeah,
correct.
And that's one that Star Trek didn't predict. No. But I suppose there was maybe no. I suppose you could encrypted communications. Yeah, I suppose that was talked about. So in a roundabout way, it definitely was. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's been really good. I mean, we should probably wrap things up there.
All right.
But I mean, I know we've got some discussions kind of lined up in the future. I mean, what we kind of touched on some of these topics today, but what we want to kind of discuss the next time round is some of those aspects about how we can move towards removing money from society, so that we can start to, over the longer term, move towards a future that is more reminiscent and representative of that's portrayed by Gene Roddenberry in the Star Trek future. Because again, we're both fans of space flight as well, in general terms, and humanity as a species. I've always thought that money is one of the main things that holds us back from becoming multi-planetary quicker, because it's all around cost.
Oh yeah.
So we'll definitely pick that up in a future episode, because again, there's lots to discuss around that.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna bite my tongue on that one, because I agree with you on that. The whole where we could be on that. That's a discussion for another time, like you said. But yes,
discussion for another time. That's a whole discussion in itself for sure. But yeah, no, but around that, like I say, it's been really good to have you on and talk about Trektivism and learn a little bit more about Star Trek. Because like I say, I've always been a fan, but like I say, I've not been a full out Trekkie. As you say. I'm from the UK, as you probably gathered by my accent. And back in the 80s, there was a song called Star Trekking by a band called The Firm, which was a parody song that I think I've shared with yourself already at some point, Chris, haven't I? And it used to really make me laugh. But anyway, on that note, we'll wrap it up at that. But yeah, like I say, thanks very much for coming on. It's been a good discussion today. And again, like I say, first time for the show, having a guest on. I think it's been a good discussion and looking forward to having more of these discussions in the future. If you've liked this little episode, hit like, subscribe, and please tune in for the next one.
Yep.
Bye for now.
Live long and prosper.